Today we're joined by Maisie and Trin, who are both youth activists and associated with Plan International UK. We're talking to them about the campaign that Plan International are launching, or have launched, sorry, this week already, called Crime Not Compliment, which aims to make sexual harassment illegal in the UK. Would you both be able to give us a bit of a background on of the campaign itself?
Yes, I think Plan International UK initially launched a campaign back in 2018 called I Say It's Not Okay, and that was targeting the area of street harassment, so basically tackling that. And it's been kind of relaunched this year in collaboration with the grassroots organisation Our Streets Now, under the term public sexual harassment, to basically create legislation that criminalises public sexual harassment and makes it a criminal offence.
How did you both get involved as well? Is this something that you've been involved in for a while, or is it something you got involved in recently?
Both me and Maisie actually knew each other before we got involved with Plan, as we're both from Cardiff, and we both worked with a local feminist group that collaborated with Plan on another project. And then Plan actually approached us and told us that we could apply for the panel and kind of get involved with more projects with them. So, and we're both quite passionate about political activism anyway. So, we went for it, yeah.
Have you both been involved in other campaigns and parts of activism before then?
Yeah, so we've both did work on the street harassment campaign back in 2018. So we launched their report in the House of Commons with Women and Equality Select Committee, and they were including sexual harassment in public places as part of that report at the time that was launched. So we both did work for that. We've also done work on other planned campaigns around kind of like menstruation, other things like that.
Right.
Why is it exactly that this topic is so personal to you? Why are you so involved in it?
Well, every girl and woman I've talked to has experienced public sexual harassment. Mm-hmm. So if I'm not doing it for myself, I'm doing it for dozens of other girls and
for sure
hundreds and millions who I'll never meet. But, mm-hmm. They'll be able to say that they feel a bit safer at the end of all of this, I guess.
Yeah. Because there was research found earlier this week, I believe, that 51%, I think it was, of women over the last summer experienced public sexual harassment, which, I mean, we discussed it already in a podcast. We do a weekly podcast, and we discussed it with a friend of ours who she was also sort of giving her account and saying how she wasn't surprised really to see this article published and to see the statistics that they were putting out there. I personally was still quite shocked. I don't think I was surprised necessarily, but quite shocked. What do you think the reaction's been like so far to the campaign? Has it been quite optimistic, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reaction has been fairly positive from what I've seen. Like, a lot of people seem quite supportive of the campaign, backing our move to kind of draft legislation to criminalise public sexual harassment. But obviously there is still a bit of backlash, that a lot of people tend to still view public sexual harassment as a form of a compliment,
sure.
Which is where obviously the hashtag "I'm not compliment" comes into it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's, at the end of the day, compliments are meant to make you feel unsafe or on edge, especially when you're in like a public space. Like, you should be able to kind of go about your own business without having to fear any kind of harassment or retribution.
Have you had much response from politicians or influential figures backing the campaign or being hostile to the campaign at all?
I mean, I haven't heard anyone being hostile. I know recently with Our Streets Now to public sexual harassment, I've launched a project with Cheer Up Love, which was like a photo series, and it was launched on the 25th as part of the 16-day course. But that's kind of what I've seen the most of lately.
Right, so not too much response from members of parliament yet, in terms of trying to get a bill put forward and a debate circulating and then eventually a vote on passing a law, which I guess is the ultimate goal. would be, there hasn't been too much of that recently. I'm not sure where the petition is at in terms of signatures at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, because it just got launched very
Yeah.
recently. But I know I've seen quite a few influential figures
Right.
post about it on social media and stuff, like especially like Gina Martin. So it's really nice to have people who like that are able to kind of promote and kind of share their support like that. Yeah, we haven't received that much backlash. I mean, there are a few people who probably will have things to say about this, but luckily they're a minority so far.
Yeah.
What would you say to people who might not be aware of how big of an issue it is or might undermine it?
Just a lot of things I'd say. A lot of them not very PG friendly, but
Sure.
I think in terms of people who would speak against this this campaign, I think it comes from a place where it's very internalized. So I think we need to try and find the roots of why we know, but
Yeah.
and why street harassment is so prevalent and stuff, and just kind of take it from there and kind of and from then we can come up with solutions to try and re-educate people on why it's wrong, because it's all and well fighting fire with fire, but it's not really going to get anything done.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
tried. But I think being able to be patient with people, especially like the older generation, I've heard a lot of comments from people in the older generations not condoning public sexual harassment. So I think just taking the time with them and kind of, obviously, which is why we took the perspective of parents being concerned for their daughters' well-being and safety. So just to kind of widen the accessibility as well, because I think people who do political activism forget that not everyone understands the same vocabulary and kind of have the same experiences as other people. So I think it's good that they kind of took a different stance with the hashtag crime not compliment, because I think quite a lot of people would find it quite jarring if it's bringing the law into this, like, oh, why are you putting up such a fuss? But yeah, I think that's that's it.
Yeah, I mean, do you think this is something that is in a way a two-pronged approach to solving the issue? It's about changing the way that society looks at this issue, understands harassment, the impact that those kinds of things have on women, and also from a legislation point of view, changing the law so that people can be punished? Or do you think that it's something that, pushing this legislation will go a long way to ending the problem itself?
Yeah, I mean, obviously legislative change and cultural change have always worked in tandem with each other. That's the same for any kind of progressive legislation that's been pushed through over the past few decades. And I think the process of actually trying to get this bill to become law is also great at just raising awareness and really encouraging these kinds of conversations around the culture that we have that makes people think that public sexual harassment is something that's totally normalized and is something that's an acceptable form of social behavior. So I definitely think you actually can't have one without the other. But yeah, right. Ultimately, the goal is to see the bill become law, but that will come with cultural changes.
Would you be able to go into more specifics as to what is encompassed under public sexual harassment? Obviously, there's a fairly broad range of specific issues that sort of come under that umbrella. Would you be able to elaborate for our listeners as to what is encompassed under public sexual harassment?
So I suppose my interpretation is obviously kind of any unwanted sexual attention in a public space. That's also including public transport, things like shops, schools, university campuses, anything like that at all. And obviously with harassment, we're also using that to include things like groping, unwanted touching, as well as verbal harassment as well. And then also things like wolf whistling and catcalling as well.
How would you like to see those sort of policed, those things? I mean, I don't know. I mean, they're all obviously things that are incredibly grotesque, I think is essentially the only word that you could use to describe them. Would you see them as being policed all in the same way? So, wolf whistling and then actual physical harassment, would you see those being policed under the same category, or would you say that there's sort of levels to how those things should be policed?
I'm not quite sure, but I think because I know different countries have outlawed public sexual harassment. So I think in France that they have police people, I guess, just handing out fines to
Yeah,
instances of sexual harassment that they witness. So I think I'm not quite sure, but
sure,
I
sure.
think but just getting the message out there that it's wrong in general should be a good enough
Mm.
deterrent, I guess.
Yeah,
That it's illegal. So
Yeah.
yeah, but I think having like a catch-all kind of punishment for stuff like that would be quite useful. I think if it were to be kind of tiered off, I think it would make people kind of try and think outside the box and kind of
right.
try not get caught.
Yeah, yeah,
So there's that to think about too.
yeah. Maisie, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much kind of agree with Trin. Again, like I'm no expert
Sure,
on like of the legislation in terms of like, I mean, I'm not a lawyer or
of
anything
course. Yeah, yeah,
in
yeah.
terms of how to police it. But yeah, definitely, I think encompassing everything under one kind of term definitely helps, because I think when you do start bringing in all these different levels, then I think some people will, I don't know, they'll see like one is like less worse than the other, when actually, I mean, it's all kind of like a really just appalling form of behavior. Like,
Mm.
it's not acceptable at all. So yeah, I just kind of agree with Trin, really.
Yeah, I mean, something that we often discuss in our interviews, on our podcast, on our shows, is education underpinning a lot of these issues, especially when we're looking at societal issues. Something that really shocked me, in a few ways, is being at university, especially seeing how prevalent this form of harassment, abuse is. And it not being against the law is completely shocking, but also a real lack of education to young people on how widespread this is, what can be done, what kind of recourse for support people have. And I guess that would be another way in both spreading the word about how awful this kind of behaviour is, but also putting in some kind of safeguarding to ensure that those that are victims of harassment have the right kind of support that they can go to and seek. And I think the law at the moment, I don't know what you think about this, but the law at the moment seems to dissuade people from going and seeking support, and that's one of the most unfortunate parts of it, is the blame is somewhat put on the victim and not the perpetrator.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, our legal system definitely tends to kind of shame like survivors of sexual violence from across the spectrum, like sexual assault, sexual harassment, domestic violence, and that's something which really needs to be dealt with as well. Um, but also, yeah, because education, I think, plays a huge role in that. I mean, we still live in a society where, in primary schools, young girls will come up to you and they'll be like, "Oh, this boy was like pulling my hair today," and a really normal response to that is, "Oh, well, it just means he likes you." And so, even from a young age, we teach girls to almost kind of accept like abuse and violence and bullying. I mean, I'm not equating that particular instance to like abuse, but it's
Sure.
that same kind of dynamic
Yeah.
that then is just further perpetuated then as you go through secondary school, and then when you get into university, and there's a very big lad culture, so it's very hyper masculine. And there's like a huge rape culture within that, and obviously public sexual harassment is part of that, being like catcalled or wolf whistled at things like sports nights. That's a really big problem. And so I think having things like consent workshops, including gender-based violence and public sexual harassment on secondary school and primary school and personal and social education curriculums is also something that's vital alongside this legislation.
I was just wondering, does your does the campaign encompass? Is it just the legislation to make the crime make it a crime against females, or is it all people? Because I was reading, I'm not sure on the basis that I'm not. That's not a provocative question at all. I was reading the comments on the petition, and one of the comments was saying, and I know Brett, you shared one of your own personal experiences about this on our podcast, that men weren't encompassed in the petition. So was that person mistaken? Do you think that it should encompass all people? And do you think that this is sort of a broader issue as well, that encompasses men as well as women?
I think, yeah, public sexual harassment does affect men too. I think because Plan UK is essentially a girls' rights charity, I think,
right,
because we've taken the fact that it's disproportionately happening to females,
yeah,
and young females especially, is basically the people that Plan seek to kind of protect, I guess, in this case. We are well aware it does happen to men too, actually.
Of course, yeah.
But yeah, I think we are trying to take the narrative that we want to kind of make it less disproportionate to women, as opposed to, yeah. But we don't forget about men, so it's okay. But yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I know the Our Streets Now campaign, who's obviously the grassroots organisation that Plan has partnered with for this launch, their main emphasis is always on like intersectionality. So it's aimed to kind of encompass everyone who faces public sexual harassment. Because there's a lot of men, especially like the LGBTQ plus community, who also experience a lot of public harassment as well. And so, yeah, the real emphasis of this is intersectionality as well. Like, it's not kind of a one size fits all.
Yeah, for
Definitely. Sure. The experience that Jack was talking about that I mentioned in a podcast only happened to me because I was mistaken for a woman. So I think, yeah, if a law like that is in place to prevent it, generally more focused at women, it probably will bring it down across the board anyway. How can people get involved and support the campaign if they want to?
Kind of really utilize their social medias to kind of get the word out to younger generations and stuff. And also they've got news outlets involved, so I think Sky News has done a package about the campaign, so it'll kind of reach loads of people. So I think there's not really a problem with getting it out there to the audience. I think it just depends on who wants to,
sure,
that wants to listen to that. So yeah.
So with the best way, if for our listeners, if they wanted to get involved, would be to sign the petition, I guess, get in touch with Plan, or any other campaigns.
I think listening to our experiences as well, and kind of, you don't have to be like a big hero and just kind of get involved, storm the government and say this is wrong. You can just be there for your friends. You can say, hey, do you need any support, or do you if someone who walks home late at night, and you can just say, hey, I can walk back with you from campus if you want. It really helps, because I know a lot of my friends, myself included, we stay in campus until it closes at like 10, and we're all spread out, and we're like, oh, should we all just walk home together? It just really helps, just knowing that you have a network of people who can support you. You don't have to be this extraordinary political activist. You can just start at the grassroots level, and I think that each action piles up into something bigger, like this campaign. So there's no pressure. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, definitely. And also, obviously, as well as kind of signing the petition and getting in touch with Plan, also for people to email their MPs as well. You can find out who your MP is on the Parliament website, and their email address will just be there. Because I think the more people that the MPs see getting involved with this campaign, supporting this kind of legislation, cultural change, the more likely it is to kind of get a hearing in Parliament and then progress further through the process.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining us. I really, really appreciate your time. I think you're doing fantastic work. Was there anything else you wanted to?
Yeah, not really. I think Well, I think I've said what I wanted to say about
Great.
the campaign as a whole. So I don't know about you, Maisie.
Yeah, and I've said pretty much everything. But also, yeah, to follow, I guess, Our Streets Now as well. Obviously, 'cause we're working in collaboration with them. So they're like the real grassroots behind this campaign as well. So it's important to keep updated on their work.
We'll include links to both Plan International and Our Streets Now and the campaign in the description of this video. So yeah, thank you very much for joining us, Maisie and Trinity. It's been very interesting.